Story 1. The Whispering Doll. The house on Blackwood Lane had been abandoned for years. No one in town spoke about it, and those who did only whispered its name, the Holloway House. They said something terrible had happened there decades ago, something that had left a stain no time could erase. But Ava didn't believe in ghost stories. As a paranormal investigator, she had explored countless haunted locations, debunking myths and exposing urban legends. When she heard about Holloway House, she saw it as just another case, another chance to prove that fear was nothing more than imagination. She arrived just after sunset, her flashlight cutting through the thick fog that clung to the overgrown yard. The house loomed before her, its wooden walls warped with age. Windows were boarded up, but the front door stood slightly ajar, as if it had been waiting for her. Ava stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and decay. Old furniture draped in white sheets stood like ghosts frozen in time. She pulled out her recorder. This is Ava Sinclair, inside the Holloway House. So far, no signs of activity, just another abandoned home lost to time. Then a thud. Upstairs. Ava's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to stay calm. Probably just the house settling, she muttered, but her grip on the flashlight tightened. She climbed the stairs, each step groaning under her weight. The hallway was lined with doors, their paint peeling, revealing the wood beneath like rotting flesh. At the end of the hall, a single door stood open. She stepped inside. It was a child's bedroom. The wallpaper was faded, decorated with tiny stars. A broken rocking horse sat in the corner, and on a small bed, covered in dust, lay a porcelain doll. Its glassy eyes stared at her. Ava exhaled sharply. Creepy, she muttered, stepping closer. She lifted her camera, zooming in. Then through the viewfinder, she saw its head tilt. She gasped, lowering the camera. The doll hadn't moved. It lay exactly where it was. Her mind raced. A trick of the light? Her tired eyes playing games? She reached out hesitantly, brushing dust from its painted lips. A whisper, soft, delicate, right behind her ear. Play with me. Ava spun, heart hammering. The room was empty. The whispering continued, growing, multiplying. Childlike voices overlapping, whispering, chanting. The temperature plummeted. Her breath came out in white puffs. She turned back to the bed. The doll was gone. The whispers grew louder, filling the air, echoing in her head. She stumbled back, hitting the wall. The shadows in the room shifted, twisting unnaturally. Then she saw them. Tiny hands reaching out from the darkness, small figures standing in the corners, their eyes hollow, their faces frozen in eerie porcelain grins. The doll sat at their feet, smiling. The door slammed shut. Ava screamed. The next morning, her car was found outside the Holloway house. The door was open. The keys were still in the ignition, but Ava was gone. Inside the house, on the dusty bed where the doll once lay, sat a new porcelain figure. Its eyes looked exactly like Ava's. Story 2. The Cursed Town of Raven's Hollow. No map showed the town of Raven's Hollow. No records existed of its people, its history, or why it had been erased from the world. But still, some claimed to have seen it, a ghost town that wasn't supposed to exist. Ethan Carter, a journalist obsessed with uncovering lost stories, had spent years chasing legends. When he first heard whispers of Raven's Hollow, a town that appeared in the mist and disappeared by dawn, he knew he had to find it. He wasn't afraid of curses or ghost stories. He wanted the truth. He packed his camera, notebook, and a satellite phone. His sources all pointed to a remote stretch of highway in North Carolina, deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The locals refused to speak of it, their eyes dark with fear. But one elderly man, his voice shaking, muttered 4 words before walking away. "Don't hear the bells." Ethan arrived just before nightfall. The road was empty. swallowed by thick trees, the sky heavy with rolling clouds. He drove for miles, searching for any sign of an old town. Then, through the mist, he saw it. Raven's Hollow stood perfectly intact. No decay, no ruin, just a town frozen in time. Gas lamps flickered along the streets, casting long shadows. Wooden houses lined the road, their windows dark. A massive stone church stood at the town's center, its towering steeple disappearing into the fog. Something about the air felt wrong. Ethan parked his car and stepped out. No wind, no insects, no sound at all. He walked forward, camera in hand. Where were the people? His footsteps echoed too loudly as he approached a general store. The door creaked open, revealing shelves stocked with goods that looked fresh. Newspapers sat on the counter, their headlines dated October 13th, 1871. He picked one up. The bells have rung. The debt must be paid. A shiver ran down his spine. Debt? What debt? Then he heard it, a deep, distant bell tolling from the church. The sound was rich, vibrating through his bones. But with each ring, the town seemed to darken. Shadows stretched unnaturally. The lamps flickered. The silence broke. Footsteps, not his own. Ethan turned sharply. A figure stood at the end of the street, too far to see clearly. Still, motionless, watching. Then another bell. The figure was closer. He stepped back, heart pounding. He knew fear when he felt it, but this was something else, something ancient. More figures emerged from the fog, their shapes wrong, too tall, too thin, their movements unnatural. The bells rang louder, the figures drew closer. Ethan turned to run, but his legs wouldn't move. The air thickened, pressing against his chest. He struggled to breathe as a cold hand brushed against his shoulder. He spun. Nothing was there. The ground beneath him shifted. The town began to warp, twisting like a mirage. The church loomed ahead, its doors wide open. A dark void inside. A whisper slid through the air. The debt must be paid. The figures were surrounding him now. Their faces were empty. No eyes, no mouths, just smooth, pale skin. Ethan staggered back, his pulse roaring in his ears. His camera slipped from his fingers, shattering on the ground. Then, the final bell rang. A screech tore through the air, inhuman and deafening. The figures lunged. Everything went black. The next morning, Ethan's car was found on the roadside, door wide open. His belongings were untouched. His camera lay in the dirt, the lens cracked. There was only one image on it. A town shrouded in fog, a towering church, and figures standing in the mist, watching. But Raven's Hollow was never found again, and neither was Ethan. Thanks for watching.